John lived a quiet life on the edge of the small town, near the rolling hills and the winding river that cut through the valley. He was a rancher by trade, a man who woke early and worked hard tending to his cattle, fixing fences, and maintaining his small piece of land. Life had always been simple for him, with its own rhythm. Sunrise, chores, lunch under the shade of an old oak tree, and then more work until the sunset painted the sky orange and pink. He liked it that way. Peaceful, predictable, safe. That summer morning, the air was thick with heat, and the smell of dry grass mixed with the scent of the river. John had finished his early chores and decided to walk along the riverbank, checking the fences that ran along the water's edge. The river was calm in most places, but there were hidden pockets where the current ran stronger, where the water swirled over rocks and could catch even a good swimmer off guard. John knew these spots well. He had grown up near rivers, learned to respect them, and he knew danger often came without warning. As he walked, he noticed a flicker of movement near one of the deeper pools. At first, he thought it was just a bird or a piece of debris floating in the water. Then he saw her, a small figure, arms flailing, struggling against the pull of the current. She was wearing a simple dress that clung to her as the water dragged her downstream. Her hair was dark and plastered to her face, eyes wide with panic. She was screaming, but the sound was lost in the rush of the river. John didn't think twice. Instinct took over. He ran toward the water, his boots sliding on the damp riverbank. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way her body was weak against the strong pull of the river. Without hesitation, he stripped off his jacket and waded in, the water cold and shocking against his skin. Step by step, he moved closer, calling to her in a calm voice. "It's okay. I've got you. Don't fight it." The girl looked at him, confusion and fear mixed in her gaze. She tried to reach for the edge, but the current pulled her back. John adjusted his stance, moving carefully but quickly, until he could reach her. With a firm but gentle grip, he caught her around the waist and lifted her from the water. She was trembling violently, coughing and gasping for air. He wrapped his jacket around her and held her close, keeping her head above his arm. "You're safe now. I've got you," he whispered over and over, trying to calm both her and himself. After what felt like an eternity but was only a few minutes, John managed to guide her to the riverbank. He laid her down on the grass, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The sunlight glinted off the water, and the world seemed to hold its breath for a moment. The girl's eyes met his. She didn't speak much English, but the relief, gratitude, and fear in her gaze were clear. She clutched his hand weakly, a small, trembling gesture that said more than words ever could. John sat beside her, patting her back gently. "It's okay. You're okay," he said again. "You're safe now." He noticed that her clothes were soaked and clinging uncomfortably to her small frame. He offered his jacket again, and she accepted, wrapping herself tightly around it. Slowly, she stopped trembling. Slowly, she relaxed, and her wide eyes softened. There was a quiet moment where neither of them spoke. The sound of the river rushing by, birds calling in the distance, and the gentle rustle of leaves filled the silence. After a while, John stood and offered her his hand. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. She nodded, gripping his hand for support as he helped her to her feet. They walked slowly back toward the edge of town, where a few people were starting to notice the commotion by the river. Some had seen the rescue from a distance, but John ignored the curious eyes. He focused on the girl, whose small hand fit almost perfectly in his and on getting her somewhere safe. When they reached the outskirts of the town, John finally asked her name. She hesitated, then said softly, "Ayanna." Her voice was small, almost a whisper, but it was clear enough. John smiled reassuringly. "Ayanna? That's a beautiful name." She looked at him shyly, holding onto his arm as if it were a lifeline. A local shopkeeper, who had witnessed the rescue from across the street, offered Ayanna some water and a towel. John thanked him quietly, then turned his attention back to her. "Do you live around here?" he asked. She shook her head slowly, and John realized she might be alone or lost. "Okay, we'll figure this out," he said, more to reassure himself than her. He knew he couldn't just leave her here. The thought of letting her wander alone, near a dangerous river, made his stomach tighten. He led her to his ranch, not far from the town, but far enough to give them some privacy and safety. The ranch was modest but welcoming, with a small porch, grazing cattle, and the scent of hay and earth filling the air. John showed her the basics: a place to sit, a warm towel, and some dry clothes he had on hand. Ayana's eyes widened at the simple comforts, and she clutched the towel to herself as if it were the most precious thing in the world. John didn't push her to speak. He just sat quietly with her, letting her regain her strength. He watched the way her fingers traced the patterns on the wooden porch, the way she took careful steps as she explored the space, and the way her eyes darted toward the river as if testing whether the danger had disappeared. He realized she must have been very brave to survive on her own in the first place, and he felt a mix of admiration and protectiveness. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ayana had grown calm enough to smile. It was a small, tentative smile, but it was enough to make John's chest feel lighter. He knew that this moment, this rescue, was just the beginning. The river had taken her fear, but it had also brought them together in a way neither of them expected. As night fell, John prepared a simple meal for them both. He sat across from her, offering food gently. She ate slowly, still cautious but more comfortable than before. There was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken connection. John realized that he had not just saved a girl from drowning. He had begun the first chapter of a bond that would change both of their lives. Before Ayana went to sleep on a makeshift bed he had set up for her, she looked at John and nodded softly, a silent thank you that needed no words. John smiled back. He didn't know what the future held, but for that night the world felt safe again. The river had tested courage, fear, and compassion, and both had passed. Outside, the crickets chirped and the river flowed quietly under the moonlight. John sat on his porch for a long while, thinking about the day, about the girl he had saved, and about how something as simple as a walk by the river could change lives forever. And somewhere in the shadows, Ayana dreamed peacefully, knowing that she had found someone she could trust completely. John didn't know it yet, but her small presence would soon become a constant in his life, following him, learning from him, and reminding him every day that heroism wasn't just about saving lives in a single moment. It was about what came next. The morning sun spilled over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields where John's cattle grazed lazily. The air was fresh and carried the soft scent of earth and grass. John had risen early, as usual, ready to start his chores, but when he stepped outside, he froze for a moment. There by the gate stood Ayana. Her small frame was silhouetted against the bright sunlight, and in her hands she held a little bundle of wildflowers. She looked shy, almost hesitant, but the moment she saw him, her eyes brightened. She didn't speak much, but the gesture was clear, a gift, a token of thanks, and perhaps a way to connect. John bent down slightly, smiling gently. "Good morning, Ayana," he said softly. She nodded, holding the flowers out to him. He took them carefully, inhaling the faint, sweet smell. "These are beautiful," he said. "Thank you." She smiled shyly, then looked down at her feet, as if unsure whether she should stay or go. John realized quickly that she wasn't planning to leave. She had followed him home the day before, and now it seemed she intended to stay near him. He tried to explain gently. "Ayana, you need to go home. Your family must be worried." She shook her head firmly, the gesture small but determined. Her eyes looked at him with trust and hope, as if she knew he would understand. For a moment, John felt unsure. He had saved her from the river, but now she was insisting on following him. What should he do? He didn't want to be harsh, and he certainly didn't want her to feel unwelcome. After a few minutes of thinking, he decided that it was safer to let her stay, at least for the morning. She needed supervision, and he could keep her safe. He started with simple chores. "Come on, Ayana," he said. "We need to feed the animals first." She followed him closely, her small footsteps barely making a sound on the dirt path. At first, she stayed slightly behind, watching everything he did, her eyes wide with curiosity. John noticed that she was intelligent and observant. Remembering small details, he showed her. He showed her how to fill the water troughs, how to scatter the feed for the chickens, and even how to check on the cattle. Ayana listened carefully, asking questions through gestures and a few words she knew in English. John answered patiently, guiding her hands when she needed help. She smiled often, and that simple smile warmed him in a way he hadn't expected. As they worked together, John began to notice something about her. She didn't just follow instructions, she watched him, learned from him, and even tried to anticipate what he needed. She seemed eager to help, not just out of gratitude, but because she wanted to be useful, to be part of something bigger than herself. It was touching, seeing how a small child could find courage and purpose after such a frightening experience. By midday, the sun was high and the heat had become intense. John and Ayanna sat under the shade of a large tree, taking a break. He handed her a canteen of water and she drank slowly, savoring each sip. They shared a quiet moment, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cows, the clucking of hens, and the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. Ayanna's hand brushed against his arm as she reached for the water, a small, trusting gesture that reminded John how fragile yet strong she was. After their break, John led her to the river, not to play but to show her how to stay safe near it. He pointed out the areas where the current was strong, explaining carefully why she should never go too close. Ayanna listened attentively, nodding and repeating a few words he had taught her, like "stay back" and "safe place." He felt a sense of responsibility heavier than ever before. He had saved her once, but now he needed to teach her how to protect herself, how to navigate a world that could sometimes be dangerous. While showing her the safe spots, a small frog jumped from the riverbank, and Ayanna giggled, her laughter light and melodic. John smiled, realizing how important these small moments were. They were building trust, creating memories that would help her feel secure. He began to understand that this little girl had decided he was someone she could rely on, and that she would follow him anywhere. He didn't mind it. On the contrary, he felt a quiet pride and warmth. The afternoon passed quickly as John showed Ayanna more of the ranch. She learned how to sweep the barn floor, how to collect eggs carefully, and even how to mend a small hole in the fence with his guidance. Her concentration was impressive, and John couldn't help but admire her resilience. Each small success seemed to build her confidence, and he was careful to praise her gently, encouraging her to keep trying. By late afternoon, Ayanna had grown tired, but was still eager to stay by his side. John noticed that she was starting to trust him completely, following his movements, waiting for his approval before acting. It was a remarkable bond that formed quickly, stronger than he expected. She was not just a grateful child. She had chosen him as her guide, her protector, and perhaps even her friend. John realized that this bond could bring challenges. He couldn't leave her alone, and he couldn't ignore the reality that her family might be searching for her. But he also knew that for now, keeping her safe and showing her kindness was the right thing to do. He prepared a small snack for them both, and they sat on the porch steps eating quietly. Ayanna watched him closely, mimicking how he held the food, how he took small bites, and how he smiled politely. It was endearing, and John felt a mix of amusement and tenderness. Evening came, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and gold. John led Ayanna inside the small house, showing her where she could rest. He set up a makeshift bed with blankets and pillows in the corner of the living room. She sat on it, clutching one corner of the blanket as if it were a precious treasure. John smiled, realizing how small and fragile she still seemed, yet how determined she was to be near him. Before bedtime, he sat beside her, asking gentle questions about her life and her interests. She responded with shy nods and small words, but he could sense the thoughts and feelings she struggled to express. John spoke softly, telling her stories of the ranch, of his childhood, and of the animals she had helped feed. Ayanna listened intently, her eyes wide, absorbing every word. It was clear that she was forming a deep connection, not just with him, but with the world around her. That night, after tucking her in, John stepped outside and looked at the river under the moonlight. The day had been long and filled with new experiences for both of them. He thought about the unexpected responsibility he had taken on, and how a single moment, the river rescue, had changed his life completely. Ayanna had followed him not just physically but emotionally. She had chosen to trust him, and in doing so had become a part of his daily life. Sleep came slowly for John that night, but he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had learned something important. Sometimes, being a hero isn't just about saving someone in a dangerous moment. It's about being there for them afterward, helping them grow, teaching them to feel safe, and sharing small moments of care and guidance. Ayanna had followed him because she needed safety, but she had also chosen to follow him because of the kindness he had shown. As the ranch grew quiet under the soft glow of the moon, John knew that this was just the beginning. Ayanna would continue to follow him, learning from him, growing with him, and trusting him in ways that would surprise both of them. And he, in turn, would find new meaning in his quiet, simple life, realizing that the bond between a child and her protector could be one of the most powerful experiences a person could have. The morning sun spilled softly over the ranch, warming the wooden fences and the gentle hills beyond. John had woken early as always, the quiet sounds of the world around him slowly stirring to life. He went about his usual chores, feeding the animals and checking the fences. But this morning he noticed a small figure waiting patiently at the gate. It was Ayanna. She had been here before sunrise, her dark eyes bright with curiosity and determination. She held a small basket, likely filled with simple offerings of flowers and berries she had picked along the way. John smiled at her, a mixture of amusement and affection tugging at his heart. "Good morning, Ayanna," he said softly. She returned his smile shyly, holding out the basket for him. He knelt down, taking it gently and thanking her. The gesture made him realize how much she wanted to be a part of his world, how much she wanted to help and show her gratitude. It was more than just following him. It was a bond that was quietly growing with each passing day. Today, John decided it was time to teach her more than just basic chores. He wanted her to begin understanding the rhythms of ranch life, to see how patience and care worked hand in hand. "Ayanna," he said, pointing toward the barn, "let's start by checking the animals today. We'll see how they're doing and make sure everyone is healthy." She nodded eagerly, grabbing a small brush and following him closely. They moved from the horses to the cattle, and then to the chickens. John showed her how to gently stroke the horses, check their coats for any cuts or scratches, and notice their moods. Ayanna listened carefully, repeating the instructions softly to herself, and even helped brush one of the younger horses under John's guidance. She giggled when the horse nuzzled her hand, and John laughed along with her, feeling the warmth of the bond they shared. As they worked, he told her stories about the animals, about how each had its own personality, how they could be stubborn or gentle, playful or shy. Ayanna's eyes widened as she absorbed every word. She asked small questions, pointing to a cow or a chicken and wanting to know more about it. John answered patiently, seeing that she wasn't just learning chores, she was learning how to observe, how to care, and how to understand the world around her. After a while, John decided to take her to the edge of the field where the river ran more calmly. "We'll go slow today," he said. "I want you to learn something important about this river." Ayanna followed closely, her steps careful and precise. When they reached the riverbank, John knelt down and pointed to the water. "See the way the current moves here? It looks calm, but under the surface, it can pull you down if you're not careful. You have to watch, always pay attention and respect it." Ayanna listened intently, her dark eyes focused on the water. She nodded slowly, repeating the words softly to herself. John felt a deep sense of responsibility. He had saved her once from the river's danger, but now he was teaching her to be aware, to protect herself, and to recognize her own strength. "It's not just about staying away from danger," he explained. "It's about understanding it. Then you'll know what to do if you ever face it again." After their lesson by the river, John led Ayanna back to the ranch and suggested they do a little project together. "We're going to make a small birdhouse," he told her. "It will give the birds a safe place to stay, and you'll learn how to work with tools." Ayanna's eyes lit up at the idea, and she eagerly followed him to the workshop. He handed her a small hammer and some nails, showing her how to handle them safely. The project took time, patience, and careful attention, but Ayanna listened and followed instructions precisely. John watched as she measured, hammered, and assembled the pieces with care. She took pride in her work, glancing at him frequently for approval, and he gave gentle encouragement along the way. By the end of the afternoon, the birdhouse was complete, sturdy, and inviting. Ayanna beamed at her accomplishment, and John felt a surge of pride in her determination and patience. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, John and Ayanna walked back to the house, their hands occasionally brushing as they carried the birdhouse together. There was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken recognition that they were forming a connection deeper than words could describe. Ayanna had begun to rely on him not just for protection but for guidance, and John had begun to realize that he enjoyed having her presence in his life more than he expected. That evening, John decided to show Ayanna how to cook a simple meal. He had prepared a few vegetables and eggs from the farm and guided her step by step. She watched closely, mimicking his movements, cracking the eggs carefully, stirring the pan, and adding seasoning with his guidance. When the meal was ready, they sat together at the small wooden table, eating slowly and sharing the quiet comfort of a home-cooked meal. Ayana's smile was shy but bright, and John felt a sense of satisfaction he couldn't easily put into words. Later, as the night fell and the stars began to twinkle above, John noticed Ayana's small hand resting lightly on his arm. She looked up at him with a mixture of trust, curiosity, and admiration. He realized that this little girl had begun to see him as more than just a rescuer. She saw him as someone steady, someone dependable, someone who could guide her safely through the challenges of life. And he, in turn, found himself thinking about her constantly, wanting to make sure she felt safe, happy, and confident. Over the next few days, this pattern continued. John showed Ayana how to plant seeds in the garden, how to water them carefully, and how to observe the changes over time. He taught her how to mend small things around the ranch, and she learned quickly, always eager to help. Her presence became natural, almost a part of the rhythm of the ranch. When he worked in the fields, she followed behind, picking up small tasks and learning from him. The townspeople began to notice the change. Some whispered about the little girl who followed the rancher everywhere, but John didn't mind. He saw the growth in her confidence, the brightness in her eyes, and the trust she had placed in him. She was learning lessons far beyond chores. She was learning about responsibility, patience, and kindness. And John realized that in teaching her, he was learning too. He was learning patience, understanding, and the quiet joy of seeing someone grow under your guidance. One afternoon, a sudden summer storm rolled in. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and the wind began to whip through the trees. John grabbed Ayana's hand, pulling her close. "Stay with me," he instructed calmly, guiding her back toward the house. Rain began to fall, heavy and relentless, and the wind rattled the windows. Ayana clung to him, and for the first time John realized just how much she depended on his presence. He shielded her with his jacket as they hurried inside, and when they were safe, he knelt beside her, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "You're safe now," he whispered. Ayana nodded, resting her head briefly on his shoulder. The storm passed quickly, but the moment left an impression on both of them. She had faced fear before, but now she understood the comfort of someone she could truly rely on, and John felt the weight of responsibility, but also the joy of knowing he could provide that comfort. That night, after the storm, they sat together on the porch, watching the river shimmer under the moonlight. John handed Ayana a warm drink, and she sipped carefully, her eyes reflecting the quiet serenity of the night. He spoke softly about the day, about the storm, and about the importance of understanding nature and respecting it. She listened attentively, soaking in every word, and occasionally she would repeat a phrase back to him, her small voice full of determination and understanding. John realized that their bond had deepened. She followed him not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She trusted him completely and had begun to see him as a constant presence in her life. And he, in turn, found himself thinking of ways to guide her, teach her, and help her grow into a confident, capable young girl. As he finally prepared for bed, John looked over at Ayana, already asleep on her small makeshift bed, her small chest rising and falling gently. He smiled softly, realizing that the river rescue had been only the beginning. This little girl had become a part of his daily life, following him not just in body but in trust and admiration. He knew that the days ahead would be filled with lessons, growth, and challenges, but also with the quiet joy of companionship, the kind that comes from caring for someone completely and selflessly. Outside, the night was calm and serene. The ranch lay in peaceful silence, with only the distant sound of the river and the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees. John closed his eyes, knowing that he had begun a journey that would shape both their lives. Ayana was learning from him, growing with him, and showing him the quiet power of trust, loyalty, and human connection. The next morning, the ranch was alive with the familiar sounds of animals stirring and the soft breeze moving through the trees. John rose early, the sky still painted in shades of pink and orange, and prepared for the day ahead. Ayana was already awake, sitting quietly on the porch steps, her small hands wrapped around a mug of warm milk. When she saw John, her face lit up with a smile, and she jumped up to meet him. "Good morning, John," she said softly, her voice full of excitement. He smiled and ruffled her hair gently. "Morning, Ayana. Ready for another day?" She nodded eagerly, and together they began their morning chores. Today, John had planned something different, something that would teach Ayana not just practical skills, but also the importance of vigilance and caution in life. As they worked, the wind began to pick up, carrying the distant rumble of clouds far to the east. John glanced at the horizon, noting the signs of an approaching storm. "Looks like the weather might change today," he said casually, though he kept a watchful eye on the sky. Ayana noticed his glance and followed it, her young mind alert to the subtle signs of nature. They were checking the far fence line when the first drops of rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. John grabbed Ayana's hand, holding it firmly as the wind pushed against them. "We need to head back," he said calmly. She nodded, trusting him completely, and they started walking quickly but carefully toward the ranch house. Suddenly, a loud crack of thunder split the sky, startling both of them. The rain fell harder and the ground became slippery. John kept a steady pace, shielding Ayana with his jacket, but the river in the distance had begun to rise more quickly than he had expected. Water swirled around the edges and small waves lapped against the banks with a force that made him pause. He knew instantly that they needed to be careful. The calm river he had shown Ayana days ago could now be dangerous. He pulled her closer, speaking in a steady voice. "Stay right here, Ayana. Don't let go of my hand." She held tightly, her small fingers gripping his as they carefully navigated the muddy path back to safety. Every step required attention, but Ayana did not complain. She trusted him completely. By the time they reached the main ranch area, the storm had intensified. Rain poured in sheets and the wind howled through the trees. The cattle were restless, and John needed to secure them quickly. He instructed Ayana to stay in the shelter, but she refused to be left behind. "I want to help," she insisted, her voice determined. John hesitated for a moment, then realized that she had grown capable enough to follow instructions safely, as long as he guided her closely. Together, they worked to calm the animals and secure the barn doors. Ayana followed his every step, helping where she could, handing him small tools, and observing how he handled the challenges. John marveled at her courage. Just weeks ago, she had been frightened and hesitant, struggling to find her footing in a world that suddenly seemed large and unpredictable. Now she was brave, alert, and willing to take responsibility alongside him. As they finished securing the barn, John noticed a small calf trapped near a fence, frightened by the storm. Without hesitation, he guided Ayana to help him. She followed, his instructions carefully holding the gate open as he guided the calf to safety. The animal was trembling, but under their care it found its way back to the herd. Ayana's eyes sparkled with pride, and John smiled at her quietly. She had learned more than just chores. She had learned courage, patience, and the satisfaction of helping others in need. By late afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world refreshed and glistening with rain. Puddles reflected the golden light of the sun breaking through the clouds, and the air smelled sweet with earth and grass. John and Ayana took a walk along the river to check its level. The water had risen significantly, but the dangerous currents had begun to calm. John knelt beside Ayana, pointing out the places where the river had overflowed. "See, Ayana," he said gently, "the river can change quickly. You have to be careful and always pay attention. Nature can be calm one moment and powerful the next. Always respect it." She nodded, her eyes serious. She understood in a way that went beyond words, that life could be unpredictable and that being alert and thoughtful was important. As they walked back to the ranch, they noticed a few fallen branches and minor debris left by the storm. John handed Ayana a small broom and showed her how to clear the path. She worked diligently, sweeping carefully, and occasionally looking up to make sure he approved. John's heart swelled with a quiet pride. This little girl had grown so much in such a short time, not just in courage but in understanding, responsibility, and trust. That evening, John decided to teach Ayana something different: how to cook a simple meal safely under changing conditions. He had noticed she was gaining confidence and wanted to give her a task that combined skill and patience. They worked, side by side in the small kitchen, chopping vegetables, boiling water, and preparing a warm stew. Ayanna asked questions, repeated instructions, and listened carefully. She was attentive, careful, and precise, showing that she had absorbed the lessons of the day. Once the meal was ready, they sat on the porch to eat, the air still fresh from the recent storm. They listened to the soft gurgle of the river nearby, and the occasional chirp of birds that had returned after the rain. Ayanna's smile was bright and sincere, and John realized that their bond had deepened even further. She wasn't just following him anymore. She was learning from him, trusting him, and seeing the world through his guidance. As night fell, John and Ayanna sat together quietly, reflecting on the day. He spoke softly about the importance of courage, observation, and careful action, and she listened intently. She asked small questions, her voice thoughtful, and he answered, with patience, ensuring she understood each lesson. He realized that teaching her was not just about giving instructions. It was about helping her grow, giving her confidence, and allowing her to experience her own strength. Before bedtime, John prepared a small bed for Ayanna near his own room, ensuring she felt safe and comfortable. She settled down quietly, her eyes reflecting the soft light from the lamp. He sat beside her for a moment, offering a gentle word of encouragement. "You did very well today, Ayanna," he said. "I'm proud of you. You were brave, careful, and helpful. Always remember that." She smiled softly, closing her eyes, and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction and protection. Outside, the ranch was quiet and peaceful. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. John understood that challenges would continue to come, but he was confident in Ayanna's growing abilities and her trust in him. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and new experiences, and each time she had risen to the occasion. Their bond had been tested and strengthened, and he knew that this connection would carry them through whatever came next. As John prepared for sleep, he reflected on the events of the day. He had saved Ayanna once from the river, but now he realized that their journey together was much more than that single act. It was about guiding, protecting, teaching, and sharing life's lessons. She had chosen to follow him, not out of obligation, but out of trust and admiration, and he in turn had chosen to protect her, guide her, and help her grow. In the quiet of the night, the sound of the river and the soft rustle of leaves reminded him that life was full of unexpected challenges, but also of rewards and growth. Ayanna had taught him patience, care, and the joy of seeing someone develop confidence and courage. And he had given her safety, guidance, and the knowledge that someone would always be there to protect her. Their bond had become stronger than ever. Ayanna was no longer just a small girl following a rancher. She was a young learner, a companion, and a friend. And John knew that the days ahead would continue to test them, teach them, and strengthen the unique connection they shared. As he finally closed his eyes for the night, he felt a quiet peace. He had faced the storm with Ayanna, and together they had emerged stronger, more aware, and more connected. He knew that the river, the ranch, and the challenges of life would continue to shape them both. But he also knew that they could face anything as long as they trusted and supported each other. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the ranch, and the world seemed alive with promise. Birds chirped cheerfully, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and earth. John rose early as always, preparing for the day ahead. But this morning he noticed Ayanna already awake, standing at the edge of the porch, her small hands clasped in front of her. When she saw him, her face lit up with a bright smile, the kind that made the day feel lighter. "Good morning, Ayanna," he said softly, walking toward her. She waved shyly, then quickly grabbed his hand. "Morning, John," she said, her voice filled with excitement. He smiled, ruffling her hair gently, and felt a warmth in his chest. Over the past weeks, Ayanna had become a constant part of his life. She was no longer just a girl he had rescued. She had become a companion, a student, and a friend. Today, John had planned a full day of activities, not just for chores, but to teach Ayanna about responsibility, teamwork, and the satisfaction of achieving something together. They began with feeding the animals as usual, but John encouraged her to take the lead, guiding the cattle and filling the troughs while he observed. Ayanna moved confidently, following the lessons he had taught her, and John couldn't help but feel proud. She had grown so much, learning to observe, think, and act carefully. After tending to the animals, John suggested they take a walk to the garden. The recent rains had left the soil rich and fertile, and the seeds they had planted together were beginning to sprout. John showed Ayanna how to check the plants, remove weeds, and water them evenly. She listened attentively, asking small questions and repeating his instructions to ensure she remembered. Her care and attention impressed him. It was clear that she had developed not only skill but also patience and dedication. As they worked, a few neighbors passed by, noticing the pair together. Some whispered among themselves, surprised by the sight of a small girl following a man everywhere. But John didn't mind their curiosity. He knew that what mattered most was the trust and connection between him and Ayanna. She had chosen to be with him, and he had chosen to guide, protect, and care for her. The bond between them had grown beyond a simple rescue. It had become a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. By midday, the sun was high, and the air was warm but pleasant. John decided to take Ayanna to the river again, this time for a different purpose. He wanted her to see how much she had learned and to understand the importance of observing and respecting nature. The river sparkled under the sunlight, its currents calm and gentle. John pointed to the water and explained how it could change quickly, how rain or wind could turn a quiet stream into a dangerous force. Ayanna listened intently, nodding as he spoke. Then, with his guidance, she dipped her hand into the water, feeling the gentle current. She smiled, proud of herself for understanding and following the safety lessons he had taught her. John watched her, realizing that this moment symbolized her growth. The fear that had once consumed her was replaced by confidence, awareness, and trust. After their visit to the river, they returned to the ranch and decided to work on a small project. John had found an old wooden wagon that needed repair, and he thought it would be a perfect opportunity to teach Ayanna problem-solving, patience, and teamwork. He explained the steps carefully, showing her how to sand the wood, tighten the wheels, and ensure everything was secure. Ayanna listened closely, her eyes bright with concentration. Together they worked on the wagon, each taking turns with tasks, offering help and encouragement. Ayanna made small mistakes along the way, but John gently corrected her, praising her effort and persistence. She learned quickly, her confidence growing with each success. By late afternoon, the wagon was sturdy and ready to use. Ayanna clapped her hands in delight, proud of what they had accomplished together. John smiled, realizing that this partnership had become one of the most rewarding parts of his life. As evening approached, John suggested they take a walk around the ranch to check on the animals once more. The sky was painted with warm shades of orange and pink, and the cool breeze made the air feel fresh. Ayanna walked beside him, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes walking ahead to check on the cattle. Their movements were synchronized, a quiet rhythm of companionship and trust. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had become a part of his daily life, and he couldn't imagine the ranch without her presence. That night, after a simple dinner, John decided it was time to share a story with Ayanna, one that would teach her about courage, kindness, and the importance of helping others. They sat on the porch, the stars twinkling above, and John spoke softly, telling her about his own childhood, the lessons he had learned, and the people who had guided him. Ayanna listened intently, her eyes wide with wonder, absorbing every word. She asked questions occasionally, showing her curiosity and eagerness to learn. As the night deepened, John prepared a small bed for Ayanna near his own room. She settled down, tucking herself under the blankets, and looked at him with a small, trusting smile. "Thank you, John," she whispered. He smiled back, kneeling beside her. "You're welcome, Ayanna. I'm proud of you. You've grown so much, and you've shown courage, kindness, and patience every day." She closed her eyes, feeling safe and content, knowing she had found someone who truly cared for her. John stayed beside her for a moment, reflecting on how far they had come. He had saved her from the river weeks ago, but now their connection was so much deeper. She followed him not out of necessity, but out of trust, admiration, and a desire to learn. And he, in turn, had chosen to guide, protect, and nurture her, finding joy and fulfillment in their shared experiences. The following days passed with a quiet rhythm. John and Ayanna worked together, played together, and learned together. She helped him with the animals, the garden, and small repairs around the ranch. In turn, he continued to teach her life skills, patience, and the importance of observing and respecting the world around her. Their bond strengthened each day, a combination of trust, guidance, and shared experiences. Neighbors and townspeople began to notice the transformation. The little girl who once clung timidly to the edge of the ranch was now confident, cheerful, and independent, yet still loyal to John. People whispered about the unusual but heartwarming bond, but John paid little attention. He knew that the most important thing was the connection they shared, the trust, friendship, and mutual respect that had developed over weeks of care and guidance. One afternoon, as they walked together near the river, John pointed out the small plants growing along the banks. "These plants survived the storm," he said, "because they were strong, rooted, and patient. You're like them, Ayana. You've faced challenges, learned lessons, and grown stronger every day," she smiled, understanding the metaphor. She had learned that courage, patience, and trust could guide her through life, just as John had guided her. By the time the sun set, casting long shadows across the ranch, John realized that their lives had changed completely. He had not only saved a young girl from danger, but had also gained a companion, a student, and a friend. Ayana had chosen to follow him, trust him, and learn from him, and he had embraced the responsibility wholeheartedly. Their bond had become one of mutual care, respect, and understanding. That night, as they sat together quietly on the porch, John reflected on the journey they had taken. From the river rescue to their daily chores, lessons, and shared experiences, they had built something lasting, a connection that went beyond simple gratitude. Ayana had found safety, guidance, and trust, and John had found purpose, joy, and fulfillment in helping her grow. As Ayana drifted off to sleep, feeling safe and loved, John looked out over the ranch, the stars twinkling above, and felt a quiet peace. He knew that the days ahead would bring new lessons, challenges, and joys, but he also knew that they could face anything together. The bond they had formed was strong, built on trust, guidance, and mutual care. In that moment, John realized that saving Ayana from the river had been only the beginning. The true journey was the one they were sharing now, the daily life, the lessons, the laughter, and the growing trust. Ayana had become a part of his world, and he had become a part of hers. Together they had found safety, friendship, and a lasting connection that would continue to grow, guiding them both through whatever life had in store. The ranch was quiet now. The animals settled and the wind rustled gently through the trees. John sat back, watching over the peaceful scene, feeling content. He knew that in saving Ayana, he had not only changed her life, but had also discovered a new depth of purpose and joy in his own. They had faced fear, learned lessons, and built a bond that would last a lifetime. And as the stars shone brightly above, both John and Ayana slept peacefully, ready for the adventures, lessons, and joys of tomorrow.